Picasso paper revelation. When you think of Pablo Picasso, what comes to mind? Is it the fractured, multi-dimensional faces of his Cubist portraits? The monumental, heart-wrenching agony of Guernica? Or perhaps the bold, primal energy of his late-career sculptures? For over a century, the world has lionized Picasso as the master of the canvas, the titan of oil paint and bronze. We see him as a painter, a sculptor, a ceramicist, an artist who wrestled with grand, permanent materials. But this perception, this monumental image we've built, overlooks the very foundation of his revolutionary genius. It misses the secret laboratory where his most radical ideas were born, tested, and forged. That laboratory wasn't a grand studio filled with imposing canvases. It was something far more humble, more accessible, and infinitely more versatile. It was paper. The groundbreaking exhibition, Picasso and Paper, at the Cleveland Museum of Art pulls back the curtain on this often neglected aspect of his work, and in doing so, it completely reframes our understanding of the 20th century's most dominant artist. This isn't just a collection of preparatory sketches or forgotten doodles. This is an immersive dive into a lifelong, obsessive dialogue between an artist and his chosen material. Here, we see that for Picasso, paper was never just a passive surface, a mere support system for an idea destined for the real artwork on canvas. No, paper was an active collaborator. It was a co-conspirator in his rebellion against artistic tradition. It could be torn, folded, burned, pasted, and sculpted. Its very fragility and disposability gave him an unparalleled freedom to experiment, to fail, to destroy, and to reinvent day after day. Think about the hierarchy of the art world in the early 1900s. Art, with a capital A, was about permanence. It was about oil on canvas, carved marble, cast bronze. These were materials of substance, of history, of value. A drawing was considered a study, a stepping stone to the final, more important masterpiece. Picasso took this hierarchy and, with the force of his creative will, shattered it. By presenting works on paper, collages, cutouts, complex prints, as finished, standalone pieces, he was making a radical declaration. He was arguing that the idea, the process, the immediacy of creation was just as valid, just as powerful as the polished final product. The choice of material itself became a statement. Using a scrap of newsprint or a piece of cheap wallpaper wasn't an act of necessity. It was a conceptual choice, a way of dragging the grit and reality of the everyday world into the hallowed space of the art gallery. The Cleveland exhibition allows us to trace this obsession throughout his entire career, a staggering 7 decades of artistic output. We see his early academic drawings, where he mastered form and line on paper with the precision of an old master. But even then, you can sense a restlessness, a desire to push the medium beyond its traditional limits. Then, as we move forward in time, we witness the explosion. We see how paper becomes the crucible for Cubism, the very medium that allowed him to break down reality into its constituent parts and reassemble it according to a new, revolutionary logic. Paper was where he first truly dissected the world. Before the brush ever touched the canvas, the scissors and the glue pot were already at war with convention. He explored texture, not by imitating it with paint, but by incorporating it directly. He wanted the grain of wood? He glued a piece of wood grain wallpaper onto his composition. He wanted to talk about the news of the day? He pasted a headline from Le Journal right into the face of his subject. This was an art that was no longer just looking at the world, it was made the world. This exhibition reveals that paper was his most constant companion. It was there for his most intimate portraits and his most ambitious public statements. He used it to design costumes and sets for the ballets Russes, transforming flat sheets into dynamic, wearable sculptures. He created entire menageries of paper cutout animals for his children, infusing the simplest of materials with life and personality. He spent years mastering the complexities of printmaking, wrestling with etching plates and lithographic stones, with every single impression being pulled onto a sheet of paper, each one a unique battle between ink, pressure, and surface. The sheer volume and variety of his work on paper is staggering. He created thousands upon thousands of pieces, a torrent of creativity that simply could not have been sustained on canvas alone. Paper was faster, more immediate. It could keep up with the relentless pace of his mind. An idea could be captured, modified, and discarded in a matter of minutes, a process that would take days or weeks in oil paint. This exhibition isn't just showing us Picasso's drawings, it's showing us Picasso's of. It's a direct, unfiltered look into the creative process of a genius, with all its raw energy, its dead ends, and its sudden, world-changing breakthroughs. It forces us to ask a fundamental question. What if the masterpieces we all know are not the whole story? What if they are just the final, public statements of a revolution that was quietly and persistently waged day in and day out on the humble, unassuming surface of paper? Block 2. Cubism, Collage, Genesis. To truly grasp the seismic shift Picasso initiated, we have to zoom in on a specific moment in time, around 1912. This is where the revolution on paper ignites, and its name is, or pasted paper. This wasn't just about arts and crafts, it was a philosophical bomb thrown into the heart of Western art. For centuries, the pinnacle of artistic skill was mimesis, the ability to convincingly replicate reality on a two-dimensional surface using paint. An artist would spend years learning how to render the texture of wood, the transparency of glass, the lettering on a newspaper. Picasso, along with his collaborator Georges Braque, looked at this tradition and decided to short-circuit it. Why painstakingly the texture of a wooden chair when you could just take a piece of wood grain wallpaper and glue it directly onto the picture? This is the core of collage. It was an audacious, almost comically direct assault on the nature of artistic representation. Let's dissect this. Imagine a typical Cubist still life from this period. You might see a charcoal drawing of a bottle, a glass, and a guitar, all fractured into geometric planes. Then, suddenly, in the middle of this hand-drawn composition, you see it, a perfectly flat, machine-printed piece of newspaper. The effect is jarring and profoundly disruptive. The newspaper clipping is not a representation of a newspaper, it's a newspaper. It brings a slice of unmediated, everyday reality into the constructed, artificial space of the artwork. This single act raises a storm of questions. Which is more real? The artist's skillful drawing of a bottle, or the actual piece of mass-produced reality pasted next to it? Picasso is playing a brilliant game with our perceptions, forcing us to confront the very definition of art and reality. The materials he chose were deliberately mundane, even considered lowbrow. He used newspaper clippings, tobacco packet labels, sheet music, and cheap, commercially printed wallpaper. These were the ephemeral materials of daily life in Paris, the things you'd see in a cafe or on a street corner. By incorporating them into his art, he was erasing the line between high art and popular culture. The news headlines he selected were often not random. A clipping about the Balkan Wars might appear next to a still life of a wine glass, creating a jarring juxtaposition between domestic tranquility and distant conflict. He was creating a new kind of poetry, a visual language where the meaning was derived from the collision of different realities. The texture of a faux wood grain wallpaper wasn't just a visual element, it was a commentary on illusion itself, a fake representation of wood being used within an artwork that is itself another level of representation. The layers of meaning become incredibly complex. But his innovation on paper didn't stop with collage. The Cleveland exhibition showcases his deep engagement with printmaking, another paper-based medium he completely revolutionized. He approached etching, aquatint, and lithography with a ferocious experimental spirit. He would attack the printing plates, scratching and scraping them, using bizarre materials like sugar to create new textures. He pushed the boundaries of what was possible, often creating dozens of states of a single print, endlessly modifying the image. Each impression pulled onto a sheet of paper was a unique record of this struggle. The paper itself was a crucial choice. Its texture, its color, its absorbency all played a role in the final outcome. For Picasso, a print wasn't a mere reproduction, it was an original work of art, born from the violent and intimate union of metal plate, ink, and paper. And then there were the cutouts. Long before Matisse made them his signature late-career medium, Picasso was exploring the sculptural possibilities of paper. He would cut and fold single sheets of paper to create three-dimensional objects, like his famous 1912 sculpture, Guitar. This piece, originally made of cardboard, string, and wire, is a landmark in art history. It's a sculpture that is mostly empty space, a drawing in 3 dimensions. He was building form out of flatness, deconstructing the very idea of a solid, monolithic sculpture. This breakthrough was born from his experiments with paper, from his understanding of how a simple fold or cut could transform a plane into a volume. The Cleveland exhibition would likely feature studies and related works that show this idea percolating. He also created playful cutouts for his family and friends, little paper sculptures that demonstrate his constant need to create, to turn any material at hand into a work of art. These pieces show a tender, intimate side of the artist, but they are also deeply connected to his most radical formal innovations. In every cut, every fold, every pasted scrap, we see an artist who understood paper not as a limitation, but as a source of infinite possibility. It was the key that unlocked the door to a new artistic universe. Block 3. Cleveland Exhibition Legacy. So, why is an exhibition like Picasso and Paper in Cleveland so significant, so essential for us to understand now? It's because it does more than just display a lesser-known part of Picasso's work. It fundamentally realigns his entire artistic narrative. For decades, art history has been told through the lens of his major paintings and periods: the Blue Period, the Rose Period, Cubism, Surrealism. These are often presented as distinct chapters in his life. But this exhibition offers a different, more cohesive through line. It reveals paper as the constant, the unifying thread that connects every phase of his 70-year career. It's the sketchbook from his youth, the collage that birthed Cubism, the etching plate that captured his despair, and the playful cutout from his old age. By focusing on the material, the curation in Cleveland tells a story of relentless, lifelong experimentation. It shows us an artist who never stopped testing the limits, not just of his own imagination, but of the very materials he held in his hands. This perspective encourages a profound reevaluation of what we consider to be an artist's major work. We are forced to ask, is the oil painting of Violin and Grapes from 1912 inherently more important than the revolutionary Guitar, Sheet Music, and Wineglass made in the same year? The painting represents the culmination of a traditional medium, while the collage represents the invention of a new one. The Cleveland show argues for their equal footing, suggesting that the moments of breakthrough, of raw invention, are just as critical to art history as the polished masterpieces. It's like reading a scientist's lab notes instead of just the published paper. The notes are messier, more chaotic, but they contain the spark of the discovery itself. This exhibition is Picasso's laboratory, and it's in the scraps, the studies, and the experiments that we find the true engine of his genius. The legacy of this paper revolution extends far beyond Picasso himself. His elevation of collage, of incorporating found materials into the artwork, directly paved the way for virtually every major art movement of the 20th century. The Dadaists, with their chaotic assemblages of ticket stubs and urban debris, took Picasso's idea and pushed it towards anti-art absurdity. The Surrealists used collage to create dreamlike, irrational juxtapositions. Years later, artists like Robert Rauschenberg with his combines and the pop artists with their use of advertising imagery were all, in essence, speaking the language that Picasso first formulated with a piece of newspaper and a pot of glue. He cracked open the definition of what a work of art could be made of, and generations of artists rushed through the opening he created. Every artist who has ever glued a photograph to a canvas or incorporated a real-world object into their work owes a debt to these early, audacious experiments on paper. Ultimately, the Picasso and Paper exhibition in Cleveland does something remarkable. It makes Picasso human again. It strips away the myth of the infallible master who created perfect paintings as if by magic. Instead, it shows us a tireless worker, an obsessive tinkerer, an artist who was not afraid to get his hands dirty. We see his process, his struggles, his playful moments, and his world-shattering breakthroughs, all laid bare on the most unassuming of materials. It reminds us that the most profound revolutions don't always happen on a grand stage with monumental materials. Sometimes they begin quietly with a pair of scissors, a sheet of paper, and an idea that changes the world. It proves that to truly understand the colossal impact of Pablo Picasso, you have to look past the grand canvases and listen to the whisper of the paper, where his truest, most revolutionary voice can still be heard.